know. It's hard to retain and keep everybody happy and build the right atmosphere where people like grow and get better at jiu-jitsu, but then at the same time, like, you don't want it to go so far one way, but so far the other way. Like, how do you balance in between there? Any
Yeah.
words of wisdom, Greg?
Beginner classes, intermediate classes, comp team.
That's true. I don't think I could do that.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying, it's like you wear so many hats because you even are a coach, you're the owner, uh, you're a competitor, you're a student, but it's like that competitor side of you wants your students to be competitors. That gym owner side of you knows that the business needs to make money in order to have students. That coach side of you wants to see everyone grow and meet the goals that they're at. And so it's like you're wearing so many more hats than they even are. And
Yeah.
so it's like it's figuring out a way that's gonna meet that. And if if you're a competitive gym, you're going to chase off beginners all day long. You're going to have small numbers, and you have to be okay with that for the sake of having a good team, that can fight, that can scrap. But you're not going to have volume, you know.
Right. I
It's
agree.
definitely the volume that makes the money, though. Like, I mean,
It's the volume that's keeping the doors open for sure.
yeah. I mean, the classic saying is that the true competitors aren't the ones that actually provide the money. But I mean, necessarily they do provide advertisement.
In a
So
sense, in some sense, nobody cares because like if you're advertising, the average Joe is just wanting to learn jujitsu.
yeah, but when you have a school that's got achievements and you're an individual looking to join, um, I one would want to look at a school and say this school's successful, their competitors are successful, their people are successful. That means
Sure,
they're good, right? That's what I'm saying. By
sure.
association, they're going to assume they're good, their technique's good.
Hmm.
Not that the average Joe wants to compete, but that the average Joe understands that if he sees this, then he also sees that they're successful.
Sure.
So
Yeah. I'm just coming at it from the standpoint that it can also be off-putting. It can be scary. It can be very intimidating.
possibly, yeah,
I have so many people because like we're a striking gym, so I have so many people
yeah,
that will tell me they were in the parking lot and they never came in. And it's like they're just so scared of what could happen. They're in their mind they're going to come in and get roughed up because that's what they've
yeah,
seen or heard from with fight gyms. And we're not a fight gym. We're super beginner friendly. It's safe. It's clean. Everyone's friendly. And in a sense, that's what your jiu-jitsu has to be too. Um, as much as we hate it on like Gracie Academy for how they do things, in some sense they have it right because what happens is they're really good at bringing in everybody and everybody's welcome, and then baby stepping them towards the ability to roll and you know but I get jiu-jitsu culture. I get we want it rough. We want to weed out the weak, and I get that.
yeah.
But
I think what Gracie has though is it's one of two things. The name, right? So the name
sure,
brings so many
yeah,
people. And then two, because of their locations are strategically placed. It's just like every other retail business, every other business, they strategically place their locations.
sure,
And in which case, what that means is that they're able to easily gain enough people that they can create that breakdown of that intermediate beginners and comp team. So then you don't run off, people aren't like you were explaining previously. That doesn't happen because there's just a large amount of people flowing through because of the name and because of the strategic location placement. So
I don't know how to break my classes into a beginner and intermediate effectively where I won't have three people per class
yeah,
or
that's the
four people per class. That's my struggle.
yeah. You're saying if you did it half and half, like okay, white belts over here, or four stripe white belts and down over here, or something. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, you're saying, I mean, I guess I could split the class. I try to do that in Terre Haute. Like a lot of times in Terre Haute, I know I have purple and brown belts that sometimes just want to teach. So like that's great. I'll like take half the group and we'll do like advanced stuff, and then they'll take the other half of the group and just go over beginner stuff.
Yeah,
But I don't know how to make it. Effingham's even tougher because
yeah,
it's just such a
Effingham's tough.
smaller market that it's tough to like balance it. I mean, if I could structure it right and I could market it right, then maybe the numbers would increase and it would be
Yeah.
easier to figure that out. But like
Um,
what I have,
this is something that I've been thinking through. Because as a white belt, I had 30 students, and so it's like I I know what it's like to start with people that know literally nothing. And anybody that ever came to our gym that had any experience never signed up, probably because I was a white belt, right? Um, but in my experience in the last 7 years, even with like Muay Thai, is like 99% of the people that come to our academy never even learn how to throw a proper punch. Um, and they might want to do UFC, bro, but that might be why they come. But they really don't want that, and they really don't have the experience for that. And so with bringing Michael on board, the thing I'm thinking through is I don't know that Michael has experience with dealing with the amount of traffic that we deal with here, and what are you gonna do? Because he likes to teach what I call like the Instagram moves, the really flashy,
Yeah.
dope stuff. And it's like, hey, dude, that's probably not gonna fly on someone's first intro class, because they don't even know what a side control is, and you're over here freaking inverting, and it's like, yeah, I don't know about that. So I'm thinking through what's it gonna look like for him to have an intro every class and still him teaching what he was going to teach for class. So in a sense, that's what you're dealing with too. How are you going to deal with your white belts so that they're not overwhelmed, both mentally, but also so that they don't get their feelings hurt because jujitsu's tough,
I
and
like
then
that. That's good.
still teach the cool stuff that you teach that's high level.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's different ways.
I'd be intrigued to see what you come up with in that process for yourself and Michael because I would be interested for myself. Sometimes I like to teach the cool stuff, but I'm realizing more and more that like I have to take a step back from all of that and I'll have to create a curriculum or create a structure for that class that is pliable to everyone. And then, maybe some of the guys like yesterday, Brandon and I, we taught everyone some very basic, like when they go to turtle, basically you're going to do this to circle to the hip. You're going to break their posture down. Then once you break their posture down into side control, they're going to try to get out of side control. And then you're going to stop them with this and just do that for back and forth. And, they all got that. And then like Brandon and I went off to the side and we drilled some more advanced things that him and I were kind of looking into. And I think the class kind of has to operate like that right now,
Yeah.
um, to keep a steady flow.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I would be intrigued with having more ideas of like what you're saying between the structure to retain the students correctly.
Yeah,
I think
I've
it
got
starts
some.
with a lot with advertising and marketing, though. Like I think you can't create the structure initially it, if there's just like Effingham, we have such a small quantity. Terre Haute's a little different, but it still is reflective mainly to marketing and advertising initially, right? I mean, you know, but
Greg is the guru of marketing and advertising and structure systems.
You run your gym the way you do until you run into a problem. So
That
what
is
I
true.
mean, what I mean is like, we got to a point where we would set an appointment for every class. So let's say we have 16 classes. That means there's 16 opportunities for us to sign up a new student. Like they'll come in and do an intro lesson. Probably back then we were just jumping them into the big class because we didn't have the leadership to be able to take them off to the side or in another room and do an intro lesson. So what happens though is like, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you set an appointment for someone to come do their first class and then they don't show, right?
Right.
So let's say that 16 slots has been filled up, like our schedule's full, but only like four of them show up. And then out of that four, what if only one or two of them signs up? Right? So we've just limited how much money we can possibly make, how many new students we can possibly attain. And so what happened as our traffic exponentially grew instead of having like say 50 leads a month, we're having 200 leads a month. We're literally throwing money away by saying, "Hey, we can only book these 16 spots. We can't deal with you guys." You know what I mean? And so it's like we're just leaving money on the table. So what we started doing is double, triple, quadruple booking. And then we got to the point where it's like, okay, we'll cap this off at 10 people per class. So I'll have 10 intro lessons in one class. Obviously, you can't just throw them into the big class because they're going to be completely overstimulated. So that means I have to have an assistant instructor take them off to the side. Thankfully, we have the upstairs now, but it used to just be the corner of the room, you know. And so then we do group sales. So what I'm saying is you're gonna have to change your. I think in the military they say something like the situation dictates tactics or dictates gear. So like you have to change your gear for the situation. I'm not in the military. I don't know, but they say
Heard
something
that
along the
before.
lines of
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Um,
heard something similar.
mission dictates gear. Mission dictates gear. I'm pretty sure that's what they say. That's kind of what I'm saying here is like you're gonna have to adapt and change and evolve as you run into issues, which is a good thing. Like that means growth is happening, that you're running into that problem. So if you're getting to the point where it's like, oh, I have beginners again, right? That's a good problem to have, but it's like you've gotten used to the fact that you have people with skill that you can just uh, ramble off all this terminology and they understand completely. But then all of a sudden you say De La Hiva to someone that's only been here 2 weeks and they're like, the who? Right? You spell it. And so yeah, I think like you're gonna adapt as you go. And so when I'm saying what I'm gonna do with Michael is like I've been here before, you know, and I've tried dozens of different ways to do different things to I'm always trying to say what's the most efficient way, what has gotten me the best results for getting signups, because that's what really matters at the end of the day. If people are signing up, that means that they had fun and that they actually felt like they got value out of this. So to me, that's important. If I want to be a beginner friendly gym, my mindset would be different if we were just a competitive gym and that's all I cared about. But I need to keep the lights on. I need to make sure my coaches are paid. So it's like I have to be beginner minded. So anyways, I have ideas of what to implement, but it's more like how is Michael going to handle that, right? Because it's like I can say, hey, this is what I want to be done, but he has his own perception of what that means, you know? And
Yeah.
so it's like it could be messy for a couple months, and I it's my job then to dial in the program and say, this is why it's not working. So I let you do it your way, but this is what has to be corrected to make that work. This is why it's broken there.
I like that because I mean, definitely I came up with a very competitive mindset
Hmm.
culture. So
Yeah.
like that's all I knew for 10 years was like compete, 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 kill, kill, kill. I'm definitely seeing like I'm having to make a shift because here's the thing, like we can have 10 competitors in the room and that's good enough. It's not, that's
Yes.
not bad or good. It's but the problem is like if those competitors aren't all 140 the same size, if they're all over the place, it's going to be hard to like keep one like are you going to keep all those guys for the next 10 years? You're going to somehow sign them into a contract where they just stay with you for the next 10 years and never leave you. Otherwise, like you've got to find some way, whether you like it or not, you've got to find some way to retain students and to make sure that they get from that beginner stage to that next stage so that they can actually be a valuable asset to the competitors. And that's like the balance I'm trying to find out right now is like, how do I become the coach that I need to become to get that step in my gym and in my students so that everybody can grow?
Ecological approach.
I'm not watching that video. Did you watch that video?
Uh, I I couldn't watch. Are you talking about the Tom
Did
DeBlas and
yeah.
that one? No, it was terrible. But I've been following Greg for a couple of years now. And if you actually listen to what he's saying and not listen to what other people are saying,
No, you know
it,
what's funny?
it's really, really good.
I don't disagree with it at all. I think the way that one he talks really throws a lot of people off.
Yes,
I
yes.
think using all these like perfect,
His
beautiful
vernacular.
words,
Yeah,
gets really annoying and it kind of
yeah.
like comes off as arrogant.
I
There's
get
a
it.
simpler way to just say these things
Sure.
because a lot of my classes have been that way. And I think a lot of schools are adapting to what he's saying. He just wants to say it where he sounds like he's a fancy doctor
Yeah,
instead of just saying like, hey, let's create this environment where you're problem solving more than you're just trying to collide and kill each other.
for sure. I think the problem is like linguistics do matter. So the words that he uses, he's using them for a very particular reason. And I know this because of striking. So in striking, we have very specific linguistics. Oh, let's think of John Danaher. When he talks about the scoop grip is different than an underhook because when he's speaking to his athletes, he wants them to know that he's talking about underhooking the leg, not the arm. So when he says underhook, he's talking about the arm. When he's talking about the scoop grip, he's talking about underhooking the leg. And he just uses that vernacular or linguistics for the purpose of being very, very clear that this is what I'm talking about, rather than it being like, oh, it could be this or this. Because in our language, right, you say spring, and that word spring could mean time of year, or it could be like the spring on your truck, it could mean several different things, right? It could be like a spring of water. And so like linguistics matter. And that's why I think he uses that. But yes, it comes off very arrogant and it puts a lot of people off. But like, I don't know if you know this about me. Uh, Prior to like the end of last year, I have only been to like a less than a dozen classes. I don't know if I've ever told you that. So
No.
like from the time that I was a white belt to the time that I got my blue belt, I had only been to like maybe 10 classes, maybe a dozen classes max. I never drilled in my life until the last year, the last last 6 months. I've never drilled. Everything has been ecological approach. I've basically taught myself how to roll through trial and error by going to open mats, by problem solving and working through things. And so like I'm a big advocate on it because that was my experience. So I don't know. I think people misunderstand what it is and the don't even give it time because they think that nothing's being taught and that's not true. It's giving constraints. So for instance, you do it all the time. You'll say, okay, they have their butterfly hooks in. You're standing, your opponent's standing, and you have your butterfly hooks in, and so you're on your back, and their job is to get past the feet, right? So you're going to start with the hooks in. You have to kill the hooks and get past their feet line, right? You do it all the time. We do drills like that all the time.
Yeah.
That's one example of unlimited ideas. And then from there, you're like, okay, we're getting past the feet, and now we have to pass the knee line. Because once you pass the knee line, the next step is we pass the hip line, and then we're chest to chest connection. So it's like it's game. It's I don't want to. It's I'm gonna say gamifying, but I don't think that's the right term. But
I mean,
you're
that's what I've been calling it for like the last couple years is like creating game concept based games is what I've called it, where you focus on an area and you
mhm,
start really building up because it is true. You need to add some type of live resistance. Like
yeah,
Greg said, there's no point in drilling when he did that interview. And so that's the only area that like I kind of disagreed with him was I firmly believe in drilling only from the sense like okay sure like when you live roll you're not going to do the same thing like live rolling and drilling are like completely your
messy.
brain works completely different.
Hmm.
But what it does help you, like if I'm drilling a Kimura, it helps my speed go from point A to point B. Like going from here to the wrist, that speed picks up faster when I'm actually just building up that motion of having that muscle memory. Or if I'm sitting up, it's building my ab strength up naturally. Like by doing 100 reps or 200 reps, I'm naturally building up my muscle group to that area to teach myself to like sit up the way I need to sit up for that motion. So like I'm a firm believer in drilling, but I'm also a firm believer in what I've been calling concept-based games, which I think is just essentially like the ecological approach. We had last week, we went over some new stuff. We went over the wrestle up. How many of you guys got to work on the wrestle up? I'd like for you guys to just kind of tell me, like give me a 2 minute conversation of what you felt like with that new way of kind of wrestling up the dummy sweep series and how you found maybe success with drilling or even live rolling with putting some of those things together.
Me and Haddon got together and worked on it probably a day or two after we met. It was okay. It's just not quite my style, and so it was we I was able to do it, but it was like it just didn't feel, I don't know, like something I would want to do live. I guess if the opportunity is there, I might go for it. But it went well. I don't feel like it's so set in me that I could pull it off in a live role, you know. But what I did find that I liked was doing the dummy sweep, and when they would step back, it's just opened up a lot of opportunity into the legs, and I like that.
Okay. I like how that's what I wanted, like not everything's gonna work. When we watch these videos or we do these techniques, like not everything's gonna work, right? Some of these series, especially as the group grows, like will not really fit their style. Some people are gonna play different styles of passing, but like how can we adapt it so it works for our game? If it's giving you a setup where you're getting into an entry that is comfortable for you, because that's what we were going over last night was as you're triggering these dummy sweeps, it's offsetting your opponent's posture, which is then allowing them as they're trying to reestablish their base, it's allowing you to get under them, connect to them, set up a more effective guard. And that's the hardest step is to go from like a guard player that's with no connection to connecting to your partner without giving up some crucial space and distance or even getting past. That's one of the hardest things to accomplish as a guard player on a high level passer. But what is your takeaway, Andrew, for the week?
Well, again, I'm going to back up, start with the start of the position, right? So it starts with the dummy sweep. First off, I love dummy sweeps. I've always used that effectively in my game. I play them a little bit differently than that, but I need to use that style more. It is good. It is something I need to work more. It's a very simple, like low risk, great simple move that definitely needs to be utilized more. But the actual takedown itself, I wasn't able to hit it live, and I was able to drill it a few times because, well, we did it in Effingham and we did it in Casey's. So. But my general idea behind it was that I liked it and I liked how it worked. But when testing it with somebody like Hunter, that's my size, that's fast as shit and lengthy, really lengthy, I ran into some like problems because I just don't have the perfect pressure when it comes to a wrestle up because I'm not as skilled in that environment as I am in something like guards or single leg X and whatnot. So I ran into some complications when it came to the actual wrestle up, and also like he mentioned in the whole thing, landing because you kind of have to land perfectly, or if you're kind of screwed. Like especially with guys my size or your size, but my age, it's like you I like with my it's almost like my size. It's like you're predicting because the movements are so freaking fast. It's insane. It's like you just have to have perfect pressure when it comes to something like that in that position at my size, or like instantly they're going to just do something like a pain in the ass. And that's what I dealt with when I ran into Hunter. Because that's kind of my test. Like that's what I do for my game when I build my game. I say, how is Hunter going to respond to it? Because he's annoying, very, very annoying.
Yeah,
And
he's consistent at going after things.
yes, very. And he's very strong and he's very annoying in the way his approach is to things. He's almost like a younger version of Derek or something, and the pain of the ass quantity, right?
Yeah.
But But yeah, that was my idea behind it. I love the dummy sweep, and I think I could do it. I need to incorporate more wrestling up. I like it, but I need to be better at like constraining and pressure in that specific environment before I think I could effectively use it in something like a comp or even in a live role.
I think it's so crucial as a guard player that you have in your arsenal the last 30 seconds or 45 seconds of a match, the ability to execute a wrestle up.
Yeah,
Because as a guard passer, when I'm on top and I'm winning the match, even if it's 0-0, like in my head, there's so many times I've seen 0-0 matches and the guy on top gets the decision. So if you're not willing to just send it in the last 30 or 45 seconds, you're not going to probably get the decision. So you have to have some kind of way of like, I'm going to send this, whether I get stuck in a front headlock, whether I get tapped, whatever it is, because you clearly don't want to just lay down there and still let the person end the match with him being on top and it be 0-0. So definitely like getting comfortable with just taking a shot and wrestling up is crucial.
yeah,
But I actually really enjoyed working the whole series. I didn't really get to do any live rolling with it. I did some basic live elements with it where you're kind of in it, and just put some resistance in it, try to stop it. But I never got to like really wrestle up from it or take a shot from it. But I drilled a lot of it and it helped me because, like you said, if you fall incorrectly, you're essentially falling where there could be a really detrimental scramble. There
yeah,
can be some
yep,
things where, like, if you don't land correctly, you're going to give up a position possibly. So for me, it was like really falling, like committing to falling to your back, but falling to your shoulder and immediately like having that coming right up into your opponent so that you're not giving
yeah.
up that chance of scramble, but you're keeping the leg and maintaining the position. Throughout the week, as I taught it more, I felt like I got more confident with it. And one thing I can tell you guys with jiu-jitsu is so many times throughout my career, as I've learned a new technique, I've told myself, I'll like this will never work. I'll never use this. And then like 3 months later, I'm hitting it all the time. And I'm like, why was I not doing this my whole career? I do have a video set up for today, and we can dive into that. Then we can just talk about it and kind of see how it goes. I think it's going to be a good video. It's kind of I think both of you guys will appreciate it. I wasn't sure like who would show up to the call today. This will work out perfect, but again, this call is a lot like the classroom, right? Like you got a fine line between like possibly advanced people showing up to the call and possibly new people showing up to the call. And like trying to find a balanced video that's going to fit for both is kind of an interesting thing because I don't want to play something so advanced that no one takes anything away from it, but I don't want to play something so beginning that like people are I can learn this anywhere. So it's a tough balance to make sure that you figure that out. But let's dive into this video and see what you guys think.
But it really leveled up my De La Hiva game, and I can't wait to share it with you.
Oh, let me get my notepad out. All right, this is 5 tips to improve your guard.
So let's go ahead and make it tip number one. Stop trying to get to single leg X. My previous approach to De La Hiva was to use it to off balance my opponent, with the goal of pummeling my De La Hiva hook to the inside. Now, this definitely is a viable strategy that works at the highest level. But too often I found that even though I'm able to off balance my opponent, their hand is monitoring my De La Hiva hook, making it very difficult for me to pummel it to the inside. And now as they recover back to their base, we're in the same position that we started in, and my off balance was wasted. Here again, we see a beautiful off balance, but Gianni's not able to pummel his De La Hiva hook to the inside. And when they reset, they're back in the same starting position. So now if I off balance my opponent and they're monitoring my De La Hiva hook, instead of trying to pummel it to the inside, I prioritize upgrading the grip I have on their leg. And now if I'm able to off balance them enough to remove their hand from my De La Hiva hook, I can pummel it to the inside. Or if they're stubborn with the grip on our De La Hiva hook, we can look to invert and begin to attack, which sets us up nicely for tip number two that Levi used to break the internet with this leg lock entry. And in my opinion, the key to this entry was Levi's control over the secondary leg. When we enter into a backside leg entanglement, our opponent is likely going to backstep, and you can see the leg entanglement is already falling apart. So people have started to come up with some clever ways of controlling that secondary leg, making it hard or at least slowing down the defender's backstep. Here we can see Cade is controlling Levi's wrist, and Levi uses a motion not too different than the Gracie Combative's mount escape that resembles making a snow angel, and this allows Levi to invert and begin to attack. But because Cade was controlling his wrist, Levi has no control over that far leg. And this allows Cade to backstep and keep that leg very far away from Levi. Compare this to his entry against Roberto. He starts out in De La Riva before getting control of that secondary leg. And now as Levi inverts, Roberto is trying to backstep, but that control of the leg makes it hard. And then Levi transfers his foot across to that leg as well. So now Roberto is able to backstep, but it's very slow. And his leg is much closer than Cade's, which allows Levi to complete this beautiful entry into the legs. So tip number 2 from De La Riva is to control the secondary leg. It's a great way to destabilize your opponent and can lead to beautiful leg entries.
Whenever you go to attack someone's leg, 90% of the resistance on the leg you're attacking comes from the other leg. That's so important. I'm going to say it to you again.
Sorry, John, no time. We got to move on to tip number 3, which is to stop using butterfly hooks. People are getting very good at this inside camping thing, and by playing De La Riva with a butterfly hook, you're encouraging it. So you'll notice Levi's foot is not acting like a butterfly hook, and instead he's using it to press against his opponent. And he uses this to create space and recover, and set up that beautiful leg entry we just broke down. Here again, we see Levi working from De La Riva, and Cade's able to defend and begins pressuring forward. But Levi does not let Cade step over his foot. And this allows Levi to use that foot to off-balance Cade very effectively and immediately begin chasing that secondary leg. Now, it's not quite De La Riva, but here again, we see Victor Hugo recovering his guard and not letting Nicky step over his foot, and instead uses that foot to push against Nicky to off-balance him and set up his attacks. But if you let them step over your foot, forcing you to play with a butterfly hook, now it can start to get a bit gray on whether you're attacking from De La Riva or they're passing from headquarters. And people are getting very heavy these days from headquarters, and it's likely going to be difficult to off-balance them. So as a starting position, I'd recommend keeping your foot away from them as much as possible. And if they are trying to step over it, try to keep your foot as a frame instead of a butterfly hook. Now, tip number 4 from De La Riva is going to be when I think butterfly hooks are most useful. One of the more common defenses from De La Riva is for our opponent to drive their knee out. And when they're driving their knee out, I think this is a great time to pummel our secondary leg in as a hook. Here we see Jeremy playing from De La Riva, and as AJ drives his knee out, Jeremy pummels his hook in. And having this hook will allow us to follow up with various leg lock attacks. Here you can see the guard passer is driving their knee out, and the guard player uses an arm drag type grip to off balance the top player, which allows the guard player to switch legs and begin to attack. And I like to think I share some pretty helpful concepts when it comes to this approach in this exclusive content that's part of the Outlier database. So I encourage you to check it out in the link down in the description. Now, while this strategy is effective, I would say it's a pretty aggressive one. Here we see Levi playing De La Riva initially with his secondary leg on the outside. But as Cade drives his knee out, Levi pummels his butterfly hook in, and he would like to bring his knee behind Cade's knee to enter into cross-ashi. But Cade makes sure to keep his hand in the way and prevent the entry, and it leads to Cade getting into one of his better guard passing attempts of the match. Here again, we see Luke preventing the same entry, and once he starts to get off balance, his hand drops immediately to the hip to prevent the entry into cross-ashi. So although I would say this strategy is effective, it can be a bit risky. There's nothing wrong with once you start feeling your De La Riva hook being compromised to just focus on retaining your guard.
This is not a very salvageable position for my De La Riva. Generally, I now have to actually forget about playing De La Riva for a moment, focus on guard retention, framing, and pummeling my feet back.
However, if you want to be a bit more aggressive, as you take your De La Riva hook and high leg it over, you can look to transition into the false reap. Here we see Taylor getting smashed a bit from De La Riva. So he brings his secondary leg to the inside as he high legs his De La Riva hook over to retain his guard. And then we see his arm come in to secure the false reap and enter into the legs. Here you can see Diego Pato using the same concept to employ a different technique. Instead of high legging over into the false reap, he high legs over to enter into the far leg, and he's able to get the outside heel hook finish. Now, when studying De La Riva, I like to compare many examples to see what professionals are doing, but that requires many hours of match study to see just a few examples. So that's why I created the outlier database. So jiu-jitsu nerds like you and I would be able to search De La Riva and be shown many examples of this position. And in my study of De La Riva, what I've found is that the general starting position is keeping your secondary leg back and away from your opponent. But as they start to drive their knee out, it can be a viable strategy to pummel in your secondary leg as a hook. But be aware of the warnings of tip number 3. And if you bring your secondary foot to the inside, use it. And don't sit there carrying their weight, which leads us nicely into tip number 5, which has to do with entering into De La Riva. Now, reverse De La Riva is kind of getting a bad rap these days because the guard passers are getting really good at inside camping. And if we can take out our reverse De La Riva hook and press against our opponent's leg, it can help us switch sides and enter into De La Riva and alleviate a lot of that camping pressure. But if we bring our reverse De La Riva hook out and use it to help switch sides, but as we enter into De La Riva, if our secondary leg gets forced into being a butterfly hook, now our opponent just went from camping in reverse De La Riva to camping from HQ, and Kynan displayed this sequence beautifully throughout his ADCC run. Here we see him putting a lot of pressure down from reverse De La Riva, and as he peels his opponent's grip off of his own ankle, he doesn't allow the reverse De La Riva hook to ever come out, as he switches sides to begin inside camping from headquarters. Here again, we see the same exact sequence. Peel the grip off of his own foot, never allow the reverse De La Riva hook to come out as he switches sides so he can camp from headquarters. Now to draw a parallel to the back, if you're the person attacking and you want to switch from the underhook side to the overhook side, you can pull your opponent across to switch sides, going from one hip to the other to switch from the underhook side to the overhook side. But you can also just switch your hand position. So in this situation, we switch from the overhook side to the underhook side without actually switching hips. So bringing this back to De La Riva, we can see the guard player starts on their right hip. And as they switch from reverse De La Riva to headquarters, they end up on their left hip. So as they've switched positions, they've also switched hips. But Kynan's also extremely good at switching sides without switching hips. We can see the guard player is playing reverse De La Riva from their left hip. And as they free their reverse De La Riva leg, instead of switching sides by switching hips, the guard player is still on their left hip, but now Kynan's gone from camping in reverse De La Riva to camping in headquarters. Here we see again another example of Kynan switching from reverse De La Riva to headquarters without switching hips. So after looking at all these examples, what I'm trying to do as the guard player is 2 things. Number 1 is we want to be the person who's initiating the switch of sides. If the guard passer is the one initiating the switch, it's likely going to lead to them getting deeper into a guard pass and us carrying their weight. This takes me back to a conversation I had with Greg Sodders, where we talked about whether or not something is good or bad. So when we ask a question like, is it good to switch sides when attacking from the back? The answer would be, it depends who's forcing the switch. Is the attacker forcing the switch to free up their strangle hand so they can get the rear naked choke? Or is the defender forcing the switch to facilitate their escape? The same thing applies to guard. Is the guard passer switching sides to facilitate their camping and passing pressure? Or is the guard player facilitating the switch of sides to maintain their guard and go into their follow-up attacks? Switching sides can be good for us as the guard player, but that's typically the case when we're enforcing the switch on our opponent. So tip number 5 is you initiate the switch of sides. And after you do switch sides, revisit tip number 3. We're keeping our secondary leg away from them, making it hard for them to force headquarters. Now, I know I said 5, but I want to leave you with some bonus tips, so I hope you enjoy. The first bonus tip is to not invert against a scoop grip. Here you can see Mateus looking to invert, but Joseph is staying nice and low, looking to take this scoop grip on the far leg. And this allows Joseph to defend the entry and threaten a guard pass. As soon as Craig starts to play De La Riva, Gio dives for the scoop grip. Here again, Fionn playing De La Riva, but is forced to bail on the position because of the scoop grip. Gordon's famous pass against Victor Hugo. How'd it start? They're in De La Riva. Gordon threatens a leg drag to get the scoop grip. Now this is from reverse De La Riva, but I think it paints the picture well. As Diego inverts, his partner takes a scoop grip. And if Diego were to just complete the inversion, that scoop grip would probably lead to his opponent countering. And about halfway through, the inversion stops. And in my opinion, this is not the top player stopping the inversion, it's the bottom player. purposefully not completing his inversion as he works to pummel his legs back into a more favorable position. Here we see Gianni using a nice off balance to set up his inversion, and his opponent has an Achilles grip, and Gianni continues his inversion to take the back. But in this example, as Gianni hits that nice off balance from De La Riva, his opponent switches to a scoop grip, making it risky for Gianni to continue to invert. So the point is, if the top player gets a scoop grip on us from De La Riva, this is bad. And if we try and invert against the scoop grip, it's going to be very bad. So the first bonus tip is to not invert against the scoop grip. The second bonus tip is from De La Riva, the first direction of attack is towards the back.
My aim almost always when I get to De La Riva in no-gi is try to circle towards the back.
Now, as we work towards the back, we're looking to destabilize our opponent and ideally get them down to a hip. But we can also take a standing opponent and put them down to their knee. And if we can grab their secondary leg to facilitate this, that would be great. But the dilemma we play is if we're not able to destabilize our opponent, we're upgrading the grip we have on their leg. And once we have an upgraded grip, now we can work back towards the center to off balance our opponent. Now, this bonus tip is so important that I dedicated a full video to it here. So if you're interested in learning more about De La Riva, I'll leave the link right here. Or if you're interested,
What'd you guys think?
It was it was very detailed, and I don't regularly play De La Riva, so I play like double leg X, single leg X, so it's not necessarily as easy for me to understand all of it.
I think there were some really good details here
Definitely,
from for top players and bottom players
yeah.
from many different ways. I still have 2 sections in my notepad to complete. I don't know where you guys are at, but we could take 4 or 5 minutes to finish that out, and then we could discuss it. We're going to start just kind of with just a summary of what you guys took away with from that video. The controlling the secondary leg is something that I think, when I play double leg X, like when I go underneath, I'm really good at focusing on the secondary leg, that I don't even pay attention to it. But when I'm playing reverse De La Riva or De La Riva, where I'm attacking a single leg, I'm not so focused on looking at that secondary leg to try to collect it to actually execute a sweep or an entanglement. One thing that I'm going to start this next week is trying to focus on seeing the secondary leg, because I liked, in that video where he kind of said, John Donner said that most people put so much of their base or their pressure on that secondary leg for support that I focus so much on the primary leg that I'm not actually trying to attack the leg that's the most important. So that's one thing that really kind of stood out to me. And then another was, instead of always using my butterfly hook, more so try to turn that butterfly hook in for my secondary leg as hiding it or using it as a frame so that they can't kill me when I'm in the headquarters, if they come into the headquarters position. So start focusing on trying to collect my opponent's leg when I'm doing these open guards, and then forcing my leg more as a frame instead of a butterfly was my takeaway for that video.
Yeah, I actually had the same points. So my 3 were the underhook on the De La Riva for the first control, and then controlling the second leg for leg entries. And then I looked at the foot rather than butterfly hooks as an upgrade. So it's like, why limit myself to being in this hooked position where I'm capable of getting smashed and limiting what I can do with that hook when I could have upgraded that to a frame from the get-go. So I think trying to start with the frame before resorting downgrading to a hook, I think might be game changer.
Cool.
Alrighty. So one of the first things I took down, and definitely considering this into my game, one of his points was, instead of forcing the inside De La Riva hook, upgrade the grip on your opponent's leg, or instead of forcing it to single leg X, which is definitely something I would do. Then also with the butterfly hooks, that whole situation was definitely something I noticed instantly. I also noticed that the guard passer was forcing the butterfly hook. So not only that the bottom player was choosing to play the bottom hook, was choosing to play the butterfly hook, but the top player, the guard passer, was forcing it, which for me is actually something that I need to remember as a passer, but not only as a guard player. I think that was a great little note there that I definitely took addition to. And then also, instead of letting your opponent step over your foot, keep it as a frame, like framing, and not giving up that butterfly hook, not letting them pummeling that into the inside, and making sure that you have that frame, and preventing them from sitting down on a butterfly hook just to create instant pressure passing. So those were my main notes that I pretty much took down.
Cool. I appreciate it if you guys would. I know we don't have very many, but let's write in the chat box what you're going to declare to work on for the week. Remember, we don't have to have it doesn't have to be anything that we learned today, just like what's the goal that you're going to try to work on in your jiu-jitsu this next week to try to improve yourself. Because I like doing that because then I want to come back, next week when we do the call and just whatever that was, whether it is, I'm going to try to be in more headquarter positions or I'm going to try to get into more of these entanglements or focus on trying to improve my guard in this way. And then during live rolling, having more success with that. A paragraph or two in the chat of what you're going to work on for your declare for the week. Awesome. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day and dedicating yourself to this call. I mean, it's funny, but we are still getting like 30 to 40 people that are like each time watching the replays because they can't join the call. And I think they still get something out of it. So I appreciate your guys' insight and hopefully you're taking something away from this. Hopefully you guys have a good week. Send me a message if you need anything. Just keep trying to make these calls better. Let's keep trying to dive into technique and we'll see where it goes. If there's something that you're wanting to work on in your game, if you're like, hey, next week, can we go over single leg X? Hey, next week, can we go over leg entanglements? Like, I'll do some research and we can find some videos and we can like dive into those where it's going to actually give you guys some insight to where you're focusing on in your game. Because I think it's crucial that if you're seeking to improve yourself the way that you want to, like you're going to learn a lot faster than just somebody telling you to do this, this, and this.